I have waited tables for the last 3 years. During my shift last night, a group of 4 women in their late 20s came in. They were a pleasure to have as customers. They ordered 4 of our house cocktails to start with and then went over the menu for their entrees. Then I was on my way back to their booth with the drinks on a tray. I walked by the backside and overheard one of them talking about how she was 14 weeks along. When I rounded back, they were talking about the same topic and it was clear to me that she was pregnant. I figured her having 1 drink wasn't a big deal. They ordered their entrees and I went off to handle other tables. About 5 minutes later, they called me over again and asked for another round. At this point I started getting concerned, but I took the order and cheerfully said I'd be right back. This time, I went to the bartender and asked him to make one of them a virgin cocktail. He was confused, but since he's a good friend of mine, I told him to just trust me. A few cocktails later, hers strictly virgin, they started getting rowdy, and Mrs. Pregnant Woman was also getting into it. I figured that since she didn't notice, things were okay. The problem came when I took them their check, and they asked to split the bill at the register. When Mrs. Pregnant Woman got to the counter, I saw her cocktails were marked with virgin. My bartender had edited each in the system for inventory. It was too late for me to edit them back, so I just had her pay, hoping that she wouldn't look at the receipt. They all thanked me and left, leaving a generous tip in the process. They were talking in the parking lot for the next short while, presumably waiting for an Uber. Several minutes later Mrs. Pregnant Woman came back and asked what virgin on the receipt meant. I fessed up that it meant non-alcoholic. She blank stared me for a few seconds and then asked if she had ordered a non-alcoholic cocktail. I said no, but told her that I assumed she wanted one seeing as she was pregnant. It was a lame lie and I'll admit it, but she looked me in the eye and asked me to return her part of the tip. I did so. Then she talked to my manager. My manager took me into her office and literally shrieked at me until hoarse. I stood my ground and told her that I'm not going to be responsible for FAS. She told me that she was taking me off the calendar until she decided what to do with me. She also informed me that I could get the restaurant in serious trouble for discrimination. And upon examination of my state's laws, she is correct. But when I talked to my mother and father about it tonight, they told me that they understood my position. The entire staff at the restaurant is against me and I think that I'm going to call in and tell my manager that I quit. But I still feel in the right here. My wife, Irene, is very fit. She likes working out and has a proper exercise regime, etc. She believes that if she feels good, she looks good, and she feels good working out, so who am I to stop her? My brother, Will, spent the latter half of last year going through a messy divorce and now needs a place to stay. Though my brother and I aren't very close, I figured he would only stay with us for a couple weeks until he got back on his feet. Will is a typical gym rat. He's always on a very strict diet, always working out and bragging about his gains. I've worked out with him a few times and he's a little obnoxious. He's always mad at you if you don't work at his pace and is always trying to correct your form. He's a pretty fit and muscular guy, but I don't like to exercise with him. Will has been pushing Irene to work out with him because, according to him, she won't be able to keep up with him. Irene mostly just shrugs him off with a laugh and tells him she would love to work out with him. Irene works out in the mornings, 3 times a week, and then does a run in the evening. But she's been busy this past week and hasn't been able to stick to her usual schedule. Will thinks that she's making excuses because she doesn't want to be embarrassed by him. Again, Irene just laughs him off. About 2 days ago, Irene and Will went on an early morning run. I didn't go with them, but the first thing I heard when Will entered the house was, "The only reason I couldn't keep up with you, Irene, is because you were sweating too much." I found this extremely comical, and kinda just laughed him off. Irene rolled her eyes and went to take a shower, so I thought that the conversation would die. However, Will just kept bringing up my wife's sweat. My wife went to work and he told her to make sure she doesn't sweat through her clothes, or when she called me in the middle of day. He yelled, "Tell the sweaty." I said hi. Of course, the comment aggravated me and I told him to knock it off and stop acting like a child. I thought that was the end of it, but he just kept going. By the end of the day, I was tired of his comments, but Irene seemed rather unfazed by them. When she served him food, he made a comment about her sweating into the food. At this point, I was at my wit's end and I told him to stop acting like a sore, slow, referring to his running pace, loser, and eat his food. Will, of course, got angry and said the only reason he was going slower than usual was because he was distracted by my wife's unhygienic sweat. Irene looked a bit offended by this, and I told Will that I would kick him out if he made another comment like that. He's been super pissed ever since. I jokingly told this story to a mutual friend and they agreed with Will. Maybe I shouldn't be so harsh. I didn't expect this amount of responses. I've decided to kick him out. He will be staying at a nearby hotel now. My boyfriend and I have been together for 2 years now. Every year at the end of summer, my boyfriend's family has a beach trip. They have a cute cottage that they go to visit a few times a year. Last year I was unable to join, but this year I was able to make it. I've met his family before many times and we get along well, so I was looking forward to it. While I was packing, I was sure to include nicer dresses in case we went out and even included a more modest bikini than I would usually wear. This one is still a bikini, but is full coverage unlike my others. I know his family can be a little more conservative, so I kept that in mind when packing. I even went over everything I packed with my boyfriend. On the trip was my BF and I, his younger brother, his older brother, his sister-in-law, and his parents. The first day went by really well. Our flight didn't have any issues, we unpacked, got settled, and all went out for dinner. The next day we had planned to go out on the boat. So I put on my bikini and had to cover up. No one said anything to me as we were leaving, or even when we were on the boat. I spent the whole day in my bikini without a single comment. It wasn't until that night I realized people had an issue with it. We were all drinking on the boat, with the exception of my BFS sister-in-law because she's pregnant. And we continued drinking when we got back. So after dinner, we were all pretty wasted. When we were talking about our time on the boat, my BFS dad made a comment about how everyone was staring at me because of my slutty bikini. I was embarrassed and just laughed it off, but then everyone else chimed in to comment on it. His mom laughed and said it was fine, that she would wear nothing if she were young again. But then his younger brother said that I basically was wearing nothing. I defended myself and said it was the most conservative suit I had. And then his older brother said that it didn't leave anything to the imagination. And that if he were single, he would have tried to steal me away. That comment made me pretty uncomfortable, and I could tell it made his wife uncomfortable too. I asked if she would wear bikinis on the trip and my BFS dad interrupted and said that she did, but it was different. My BF just laughed along with all of this, didn't even see anything wrong with it. When I told him to say something, he said that I did look like I was trying to get dick down. Well, that comment was the last straw. I went to our room. I wanted to leave early after all that. But we only had a few days, so I just pushed it in the back of my mind and kept to myself the rest of our trip. I know they were just joking, but what they said really bothered me and made me feel uncomfortable. I'm not sure why my BF doesn't get that. He just keeps saying that they were joking around. But it obviously wasn't very funny to me, so now he's saying I ruined the trip by moping around the rest of the time. I am a 36 years old male. My wife passed away 2 years ago. I have an 11-year-old son named Sean. I'm doing okay, with money. I have a stable income and support system. I have a friend named Kate. We've been together since we were kids. She's like a sister to me, although she tends to boss me around. She's introduced me to her female friends, hoping that I'll settle down again. I told her I have other priorities and I'm required to focus on Sean and his health. He's diabetes. Kate thinks there's something wrong with me, but not everyone's circumstance is the same. I started noticing a pattern in her behavior after she introduced me to a friend of hers. She'd tell me to leave Sean at home when we hang out and meet her friends. She'd tell me to take down any pictures that have my son and wife in it because ladies will assume that I'm a single dad or still married, and that'd limit my chances in dating. I told her to knock it off, and she said that she was looking out for my social life, saying I'm ruining it and exhausting myself. I stopped talking to her for days. Then I decided to let it go. She's been insisting on bringing her friend to visit me with other friends. I agreed to have them as guests. Kate suggested I take Sean to stay with a relative since it'll be adult dinner, but I refused. He was comfortable in his home and didn't want to go. Kate was at my place before her friends arrived. I checked on Sean and told him to tell me if he needed anything before he went to sleep. At 12:30, while I was sitting and just starting to chat with Kate's friend while Kate kept blinking at me with a smirk on her face, I got a text message from Sean telling me he wanted to use the bathroom but the door handle was stuck and he couldn't open the door. I went upstairs to check. Kate followed me. I found that the door was actually locked. I was confused. I asked Sean and he said he didn't lock it. I started looking for the key. That's when Kate quietly handed it to me saying she took it. I was stunned. I opened the door for Sean, then I asked her why she locked the door. She said that lied to her friend about me not having kids and didn't want her to see Sean. She said it was no big deal since he was sleeping, but I was furious. I started yelling at her as she kept shushing me. Everyone started leaving after I yelled at Kate and cussed her out for doing this. She blew up after her friend left and said I was an idiot because most people don't mention kids until after months into dating, and that I didn't deserve her help to move on when she thought I was a decent, sane person. I called her stupid and told her to get out of my house. She told me to wallow in my misery and left. Then her friends kept blaming me for making a scene and treating Kate like that, especially since she cooked dinner and helped a lot.